Michael's work is so meaningful because it really is the standard bearer of the good food movement.
His genius is infectious in the good way, in that you're familiar with the information, but the way that he puts it into the popular vernacular suddenly means it's some information that you can use and you can ponder.
This book is so important because he falls in love with cooking, and it's a beautiful way of expressing the importance of what's going on around food in this country. Michael's had so many important food books, I mean really seminal, and I think this is kind of the missing piece.
I have long been a fan of Michael Pollan's, and I really feel like he has a gift that few writers have, where he can delve really deeply into a subject that a lot of people don't know about and make it really approachable and understandable.
There's all kinds of greatness that he captures in this book that inspires me to inspire more people to cook at home.
Michael Pollan's Cooked is a really eloquent and personal argument on so many different levels for cooking and for people returning to the kitchen to cook.
Cooked understands and explains to the layman the beauty and the magnificence of the natural methods of heat transfer. That is to say, cooking.
I think it defies genre, absolutely. I mean, I would probably call it nature writing or food writing, but it's so much deeper and more beautiful than that. It is political, but it's not overtly political, and there are recipes, but it's not a cookbook. It's a memoir, and it's also profiles of different people, so it transcends genre.
The journey to write Cooked and report Cooked took about 3 years, and the way I proceeded was to apprentice myself to a series of masters of one kind or another. There's a barbecue pit master from North Carolina, and there's a local chef, and there was several bakers, and then there was a series of masters of the various arts of fermentation. A cheesemaker, a brewer, and picklers. The book is a story of an education. And in organizing that education in these various transformations of nature into cooked culture, I realized at a certain point that they correlated to the classical elements.
The book is divided into 4 sections: fire, water, air, and earth. And each one represents a way of cooking or an element of cooking.
He goes to the extreme obsession of taking barbecue, baking, bread particularly, braising, and fermentation into the regular day process of how you live your lives.
Cooking is something that we all have in our DNA. It hasn't left us in the last 50 or 80 years. We used to do this. We're like coming back home.
The central premise of this book is that cooking is one of the most interesting and worthwhile and self-defining things we humans do. The discovery of cooking is probably what made us who we are as a species. Before we started cooking, we relied on raw food. And if you look at other primates that still rely on raw food, they spend most of their life chewing. This doesn't leave a lot of time for things like art, music, books. When they discovered that they could take a food and over a fire transform it into something that tasted better, was safer, and more nutritious, this was a revolution because it allowed our brains to get bigger because we were taking in more energy. Cooking made us who we are. We are the cooking animal. So given that it's such a part of our identity as animals, it struck me as curious that we would be willing to outsource it.
I think a lot of people are intimidated by cooking because the sort of fast food nation has told them it's much easier to go and buy something they're already prepared. Don't go in the kitchen, just get it to go.
If you look at the history of processed food, the industry worked very hard to convince us that we can't do it, that we don't have time, that it's incredibly difficult, and that it would be liberating for the industry to take over. When in fact it's the exact opposite of liberating. It's infantilizing.
There's an amazing section about the age of specialization and the age of generalization. It didn't start today, it started really with Adam Smith and the wealth of nations and dividing tasks and conquering them. But it's really sort of taken an extreme form these days. And he just had such an eloquent argument for slowing down and for getting to know how to make food and becoming a producer instead of just a consumer.
One of the great problems with cooking is that we've mystified it. We watch cooking on television, we celebrate great chefs, and the downside is that most of us feel helpless in the kitchen. We can't possibly cook what we see made on television. And that mystification, I think, is discouraging people.
All of the most delicious things are perceived as to be the sacred kind of grail that you must strive hard for and only be lucky enough to sink this reservation at the whatever new Chang Bourdain Batali repair restaurant. But Michael removes all of that elusive luxury and makes it part of your regular life.
Unless you are really engaged in the process of cooking, doing it yourself, you're sort of on the outside looking in and observing it. But when you're doing it, this is something that you feel awakened by and you feel proud of.
The best scenario of Americans cooking again is, first of all, Americans will be more healthy. And that will change everything in America.
And there's a lot of very good research done by economists, as well as nutritionists, that people who have a home-cooked meal several nights a week eat much healthier diets, have much lower rates of obesity and diabetes. So if you cook, you can tune out the whole conversation about nutrition. You can tune out the whole conversation about counting calories. All those things take care of themselves if you cook yourself. It's magic.
I hope that people who read this book walk away feeling empowered to cook and empowered to try. And I hope that by being sort of encouraged by a person who isn't necessarily a natural cook, really almost speaks to them so much more directly than being told to cook by a cook.
My great subject as a writer has always been, I look back now, all my books now have really been about our engagement with the natural world. When we eat, we're engaging with nature. When we cook, we're engaging with nature. And you can do that in the kitchen. Amazing things are happening in the kitchen if you just pay attention.
Hi, I'm Ari Batali. Don't forget to subscribe to THNKR.
The biggest impact that Omnivore's Dilemma has had is, one, people are really absolutely considering the types of food that we're eating, and two, I think people are really taking action.
When people start really thinking about how animals are being raised, and they say to themselves, I want to continue to eat meat, but I don't want it raised like that. I need the alternative.
The most dangerous thing about the industrial food system is that the food doesn't taste good. To have flavor, you have to have all the minerals and microvitamins that come out of healthy soil. So flavor and nutrition are sort of the same subject.